Buddhism is a world religion founded by the Buddha in ancient India. Buddhists seek wisdom, meaning, inner peace, and freedom from greed, hatred, and ignorance. Mutually sustaining life, a Buddhist call to a troubled world.
However unconscious people may be of the fact that everyone has within his possession this supreme nature, and however degraded and ignorant they may be, Buddha never loses faith in them, for he knows that even in the least of them, there are, potentially, all the virtues of Buddhahood.
Last week, we talked about a dimension of interdependence, which we are calling the sacred self. Well, today, I wish to focus our attention on a related teaching called the Buddha nature. Buddha nature is a potentiality to become a Buddha that dwells in all sentient or living beings. This means that Buddha nature is found in humans as well as in non-humans. As today's passage points out, people are often not aware that they have this Buddha nature within. They are not aware, for the Buddha nature is covered over by greed, hatred, and ignorance. Buddha nature is also expressed as Buddha womb, Tathagata Garbha, where the potentiality is compared to a womb that encloses a potential Buddha. A sutra typically refers to a text regarded as a discourse of the Buddha, and a sutra called Buddha Womb Sutra focuses on Buddha nature, in which we find ingenious metaphors employed. For example, the Buddha womb is likened to a golden Buddha image wrapped in a dirty rag, or an unborn baby destined to be a prince in the womb of an indigent woman. In all of these descriptions, undesirable outer layers representing our greed, hatred, and ignorance conceal Buddha nature or the Buddha womb. Yet, simultaneously, the teaching of Buddha nature promotes a message of hope and inclusion, since all human and living beings are endowed with it. To help us deepen our understanding, we are fortunate to have with us as our guest Professor Gene Reeves. Professor Reeves serves as international advisor to Rissho Koseikai denomination of Buddhism and serves on the faculty of its seminary. Among his recent publications is a translation of the Lotus Sutra, one of the most important sutras in Mahayana Buddhism. Well, Gene, thank you very much for taking the time from your busy schedule to be with us.
My pleasure.
And may I ask you your thoughts, your personal understanding of Buddha nature?
Well, in your introduction, you mentioned an earlier program about interdependence.
Yes.
And I like to emphasize interdependence in relation to Buddha nature as well. So for me, Buddha nature has to do with the kind of potential or even power that every living being has within themselves to become a Buddha for someone else.
For someone else.
As you know, the Lotus Sutra is very famous for its parables.
Yes.
And in all but one case, its parables are basically about relationships. Relationships between someone who is a kind of stand-in for the Buddha and someone who is a kind of stand-in for us, for you and me. And in all of these cases, it's a relationship of interdependence. So one of the most famous of those stories is the one in chapter 4. This is a story about a father who's become very rich in business, and whose son ran away as a teenager and has been missing for 40 or 50 years.
Yes.
And the father is longing for the son. And quite suddenly, unexpectedly, the son shows up in front of the gate of the father's house. The son doesn't know it's his father, but he's frightened. The father realizes it's his long-lost son, and he's overjoyed. And I won't tell the whole story, but there's a good part of it there in which the father finds a way to get the son to work for him, not knowing that it's his father that he's working for. And the father finds ways to gradually encourage the son to develop his self-confidence, his sense of self, his ability to deal with his own life, and his ability to deal with his father's business. So that at the end of the story, the father can reveal to the officials and the people who work for him and everybody that this is my real son.
I see.
And everything I own belongs to him. It's his inheritance. So it's a kind of story about disclosing the Buddha nature or developing the Buddha nature in the son. But the point that I like to emphasize is that the father needs the son in order for his life to be complete. And the son needs the father for his life to be complete.
It's a mutual...
So it's a mutual interdependence going on there, which I think is very important for understanding what Buddha nature is.
Okay, so that's very interesting. Usually you think of Buddha nature as something for yourself, but here it's more of an for yourself and relationship to others.
Yeah, we really teach that one can only discover, in a sense, realize one's own Buddha nature through seeing the Buddha nature in others. So in Risha Kosakai, for example, there's a great deal of effort put into trying to help others realize their Buddha nature as a way of realizing our Buddha nature. So that means, for example, one of the things that's interesting about this is it means that not only other human beings, not only other living beings, but even mountains and rivers and grasses can be revelations of Buddha nature for us.
I see. So, as we mentioned, the Lotus Sutra includes some parables that illustrate the teaching of Buddha nature. And so, what is your favorite?
Well, yeah, you have 3 children, I think. Which is your favorite? It's a little bit like asking that. I like them all.
Good.
But rather than a parable, I think I'd just like to say a few words about a story that is not a parable. It's found in chapter 15 of the Lotus Sutra. It's kind of a long story, but we'll try to make it short. This is a story in which earlier in chapter 11, Buddhas have been assembled from all over the universe in order to see the body of this voice that's coming out of a stupa. And
well, what is a stupa?
This is the stupa of a past Buddha called Many Treasures, who's suddenly appeared.
But it's a monument.
A stupa is basically a depository for the remains, crematory remains of a body.
All right.
So everybody's shocked that a voice comes out of a stupa because there should only be ashes and bones in there. But this voice comes out of the stupa praising Shakyamuni Buddha for preaching the Lotus Sutra. And everybody wants to see this body that's inside. Well, Shakyamuni explains, well, this same Buddha said many, many years ago that whenever someone was praising the Lotus Sutra, he would come in his stupa to praise that person, that Buddha. But he also said that if people wanted to see his whole body, it would be necessary to assemble the Buddhas from all over the universe, from the 10 directions. So everybody, well, let's do it. And so anyway, they get assembled, and the story goes on. They all come together.
Yeah, okay.
It's as I said, it's a long story.
Okay.
But the part I want to get to actually comes up later. So they're all assembled, and various things happen. Stories are told. And then later in chapter 15, it's time to think about going back to where they came from. And some of those bodhisattvas who've come from other places, other worlds, go over to Shakyamuni Buddha, and they say, it must be tough. You've got a really difficult job being the Buddha of this world. The people are kind of slow and caught up in desires and things, this and that and the other thing. So we'd like to volunteer to stay and help you out. And Shakyamuni Buddha basically says, well, thank you very much for offering, but no thanks. We have plenty of bodhisattvas of our own. And then suddenly out of the earth, springing up like water out of a well, come zillions and zillions and zillions of bodhisattvas. And of course, Maitreya and the others are shocked. Who are these guys? Who taught them? Where did they come from? And Shakyamuni Buddha explains that he taught them. And these are his followers. And the point of the story is that these bodhisattvas, this multitude of people who can help others, are we ourselves. We are the bodhisattvas who emerge from the earth.
That's great.
And the point of the story is partly to emphasize our responsibilities as bodhisattvas for carrying on the Buddha's work, but it's also a powerful affirmation of the importance of life in this world, as opposed to wanting to go to some other world to escape the troubles of this world. This is our world, and it's because it's Shakyamuni Buddha's world, it's our responsibility.
So, what are some of the implications for those of us living in modern society, especially in the U.S.?
Yeah. My fear is that in America today, there's a very strong tendency to demonize people, and to divide people into the good and the bad, and the true and the false. And I think that what the Lotus Sutra teaches us above all else is to respect other people. To try to find in everyone, no matter how bad they may appear to us, but to try to find in everyone the good side, the good quality, and try to grow that and help to try to develop that. And I think that that could be a very important lesson for, especially for people in the West who've grown up with a tendency to want to divide people into two kinds. We think that in everybody, in every living being, there is something good to be nourished.
So, your points are well taken. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I hope that you could not only gain a better understanding, but also be moved and inspired by the presence of Buddha nature in each of you. It's a teaching that gives us hope and a sense of great optimism. We also need to remember that other people and other living beings are all endowed with Buddha nature, thus encouraging us to regard all living entities, whether animals, birds, fish, or even plants, with a deep and abiding respect. Next week, we'll take a final look at the teaching of the second mark of existence, with a focus on the dimension of emptiness, a mysterious yet alluring Buddhist word. We hope to see you then.
We at Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai pursue peace and happiness for people around the world. We have published the Buddhist teachings into 41 languages and donated our publication to hotels and other facilities in 55 countries. We would like to share the Buddhist teachings with people around the world. That's our mission. Visit our website for more information.